Good evening. My name is Viola Edward, a lover of breathwork and of psychotherapy. And it's my honor and pleasure today to be talking about these two subjects that are so important in my life. And I am who I am because I did psychotherapy as a patient and I discovered breathwork, and that joined all what I have studied and done in my life and had helped me to get over many situations of my life and to become the person that you see today. May is the month of awareness for mental health, and I call it clarity for mental fitness to talk about that clarity and mental fitness and breath work. And for this reason, I have invited my dear colleague, Jim Morningstar. He's my colleague, he's my teacher, he's my friend, and somebody I love dearly. And both of us, we met in IBF in 1999. Welcome, Jim. Jim Morningstar, PhD, is the Director of Transformations Incorporated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Has held license as a clinical psychologist since 1973. He is a clinical supervisor, seminar leader, and has pioneered in the development of therapeutic breathwork. He founded the Transformation Breathwork Training Program in 1990. He has authored 5 books in the field of integrative psychology. He is co-director of the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance, that I'm part of the board. Jim teaches internationally, and he really is for us whenever we need him. So welcome, Jim, to this conversation that we're gonna have together about mental health fitness in all areas of life, in the workplace, in our life, in all areas of society. Welcome.
Well, I am thoroughly delighted to be here with you, Viola, and for many reasons. One is what you already mentioned is our dear friendship that we have with one another. And we must recognize, of course, that this friendship came about because of the IBF, the International Breathwork Foundation, which came about because of breathwork and our love of how breathwork infuses health, well-being, vitality, spiritual awareness in all areas of our life. And so we have that common background together, and we have a common interest in spreading the value of breathwork around the world as not only practitioners of breathwork, but also people who have been involved in the mental health field for most of our careers. You've done so much work with addictions and bringing breathwork as an adjunct to the field of healing addictions and many other areas of mental health yourself. So you are truly a friend and a dear colleague, and it's my honor to be with you this morning to talk about the subject that's favorite to us.
Exactly, we can talk for hours. And also something that is very particular about breathwork mentors is because we have gone through so many experience and through our training, professional training, and we will be talking about it. We really learn how to make what is implicit to our experience, to make it explicit to our student and to our client. So with a structure and with a methodology set, so they can take it with them home. So it's so important, the autonomy that conscious connected breathing has, that after you do certain package of session, in many cases are 10 to 12 session, you really can practice it by yourself. And I remember when I entered into the breathwork world, I felt so empowered by that. Of course, you train and you have your breath worker or your therapist or your mentor for as long as you want. But can you imagine that you learn a technique and you can take it home with you and you can take it wherever you go? Because as positive psychotherapy said, positive is coming from positum, and positum means what is there, what is given. So with the learning of the conscious connected breathing, you increase your positum to be able to deal with challenges of life. Because life will take us out of balance, isn't it, Jim? And then we have to learn and go back to balance. So you as a psychologist, how is it that you did combine, because of course I came much after you, and I have teacher like you that make the path easy for me. But how is it that you combine these great methodologies together? I mean, how was your beginning? How is it all the challenges, or at least two of the challenges you faced back then when you merge breath work or conscious connected breathing into the practice of psychology and psychotherapy?
Well, first of all, from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to work with people. I wanted to work in a helping way with people. And that's why I got into psychology, because it, for me, combined both service in terms of clinical work and also science in terms of something that gave a basis for doing that help, something you could fall back on to make sense out of different symptoms that people had, different illnesses that they would get into. And so I went through my full training as a clinical psychologist, which is 4 years of undergraduate and then 5 years of graduate courses, including a year of internship. But you know what? Well, at the end of that training, I knew something was missing. I knew that I did not want to spend my life sitting in an office and just talking mentally with people about their issues, even though I could see there was usefulness, there was help in it, but it didn't speak to me because you might say the soul of it missed something in it. And so it was not until I came upon the kind of helping work that included the body, the mind, and the spirit, that I felt, now this not only brings me together personally, but this is something I would want to share with the world, that I would want to devote my life to. And at first, it was not breath work. At first, it was new advances in the area of psychotherapy, Gestalt therapy, bioenergetic therapy. These were precursors to much of our modern work, but some of those basic principles I still use as a psychotherapist. So first of all, we should make a distinction between psychotherapy and breath work. And psychotherapy is a field of study, a profession based on a certain theory or model of health and wellness. And traditionally, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual for Mental Health is built upon a categorization of various illnesses and symptoms that people have, which, as rational and logical people, we could say, okay, I see an issue going on with this person, and it's important that we have some tools to address that issue. How this even came about, going back historically, was that before there was the science involved in helping people with mental health issues, it was basically from a religious point of view that people were treated. And back in the days before the 1900s, people were often categorized in religious terms as sinners or people who were saved. And the approach to trying to help people was basically religious. If we go back even farther than that, religion is there to serve the spiritual nature of the human being. And the metaphysical beginnings of rebirthing and breathwork that Leonard Orr correctly espoused were distress in our human life comes from separation from source. Separation from our source, in a sense, is the original sin and the only sin. If Leonard even went back to the Garden of Eden and talked about our cosmological theory of how humans got separated from source. And that metaphor, the Garden of Eden, is God says to humans, there are two trees in the garden, the tree of life, which you should eat of fully, and you are life. And then there's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is a beautiful tree, and it's wonderful and useful, but it's not who you are. And that knowledge of good and evil is our mind, it's knowledge. So we have knowledge of things, but we are not what we think. We are not the judgments that we can make up, because the mind is always making judgments, good, bad, right, wrong. Okay, we need to use judgments in life. That's a door, that's a window. But when we get into evaluative judgments of good and bad, right and wrong, we separate ourselves from the unconditional love that we are and that we have as human beings. And so what happened in separating ourselves from the Garden of Eden is we began to believe that we are our judgments. Oh, today I'm a good person. Oh, but I'm a bad person today because I didn't feed the cat. Oh, I'm a good person because, And so we get into living life by a series of judgments, good, bad, right, and wrong. Now, what breathwork has done is brought us back to source, because when we breathe, we go back to, no, I'm here right now. I'm I'm not good or bad. I'm breathing right now. I feel pain. I feel, but it's not because I'm a sinner. It's not because I'm an evil person. As I breathe into it, I get back to, well, what is it that has kept me from feeling like a good father or a good husband or a good, I breathe and I bring myself back into awareness of the present moment and the truth of my essential good nature, but also the error of how I have stepped away from my oneness with my children or my spouse. And so there's a beauty there that breath takes us back to our source. But we don't throw out science, because with the Enlightenment era, we discovered that we could both think and be a rational person, but not use reason to condemn people. Because what often happened with people who were in distress and they couldn't find a cure for that by just praying over them or by making them do penance, they were locked away. People with severe distress, or as we'd call it today, trauma, were put in institutions that kept them out of the sight of the rest of humanity because it disturbed us. We didn't know what to do with it. Well, we know now the reason that much of that distress disturbed us, that we didn't know what to do with, is because it was also a mirror of us. And we, with fear of looking at the mirror, wanted to put people away in institutions. Murray Bowen, the psychiatrist who was the father of family therapy, as a resident, did an experiment with a schizophrenic individual, a young man who had schizophrenia. He said, well, rather than putting him in a locked ward in an institution, let's get a family to volunteer to be in the ward, and we'll observe what's happened rather than just this person exhibiting unusual symptoms or bizarre behaviors. Well, when he put the whole family on the ward, it wasn't very long till he understood why this young man was acting the way he was. Look at the context. Look at the dysfunctional communication that was going on.
Will that be matching what Abraham Maslow said? To explore the internal labyrinth of the mind, body, spirit, and emotion, we should not work with the psychology of the dysfunctional. What is needed is a psychology of freedom with the appropriate tools to find our own truth and help others to find theirs.
Exactly. Because where science and spirituality went afoul is getting wrapped up in judgments again. Healthy people versus unhealthy people, right? So what Murray Bowen does is he began to look at the whole system rather than making a judgment of sick and healthy. Let's look at an entire system and see how it functions and how we can have people function in a more loving and effective way with one another. The merging then of breath work with the science that had gotten sidetracked by just judgments, which still led to good or bad people, healthy or sick people, now they were called, versus good or bad people, was okay, let's look at them with the eyes of wholeness or unconditional love. And let's also see what is going on in the system of how they live. And so we will go with a loving approach to restore the wholeness that is the essence of the person. The person is not born dysfunctional. The person is not, in essence, an aberration. So this is when I got back into saying, now I can put the pieces of my own personal puzzle together. I can have a systematic approach to working with people, using tools that are effective, but also doing it in a way that is unconditionally loving. The tool I say is the major one of breath workers is holy vision. Of course, the
Yeah.
major tool is breath, loving breath. But beyond that, using the mind and training the mind to see people as already whole. So
Yes.
when we say mental health, well, we mean emotional health and physical health, and we mean the whole ball of wax. But to train the mind is, I think, the essence of bringing breath work and psychotherapy together.
Isn't it as Eric Bernes say also that we were all born okay, and then it's in that time that when we felt that energy are feeling threatened or something we're not getting, and we go into fear, and then we start creating all this transactional communication even before we start talking. But all of us, we are okay until, and this okayity, it will be returned if we find the good tool and the good method. And of course, as breath worker, we said, and if we breathe it in and out.
Exactly. And that's the approach when we're approaching a person as essentially okay or essentially whole. They experience that. And even though they still have pain or discomfort, they partner with the coach or the therapist to return to wholeness, something that they already own and have, rather than they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. They're a sinner, they're a bad person, there's something essentially wrong with them, and they've got to prove themselves. They've got to somehow get back into the good graces of Source by showing their worthiness. And we can never do enough work to earn what we already have, what we already are.
Exactly.
So it may sound like semantics, but it's not. It is the essential core of how we are approaching people that makes a difference. Now, unfortunately, though, people's minds will look for a reason why they're not feeling okay. And if they're given a label, if they're given a diagnosis, often that will become the self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, I am this way because I am essentially a depressed person. There's a relief in that it's okay, maybe I'm not bad, maybe it's just I'm chemically imbalanced. And there's a kind of relief that comes with that because it takes away the heavy judgment.
And
And
responsibility, isn't it also?
it can, exactly. So then the responsibility is given to the doctor to give me the right medication to help balance me. And we go into, it's a friendly collaboration, but it still is putting the responsibility outside of myself, or the power, I should say, outside of myself to heal.
Isn't it now with many times I said, yeah, that is true. You know, you have seen so many doctors, and it's true. And me too. I have seen so many doctors, and I personally I have these things from family that I produce very, very high cholesterol, like extremely high. And you know that, but how we're gonna learn to live with what we have in the best way possible? How we're gonna learn to be autonomous, to be empathetic, and to have synchronicity between what we feel, what we think, what we do, what we talk, what we model, how we influence others, independently with the diagnosis. Yeah, because we have, some of us, we have certain diagnosis of something. Let's don't fight with it, but let's see how we live with it. And we always say, you know, like, uh, uh, let's remember that the definition of health is not the absence of the illness, isn't it? Is a combination of being in well-being physically, mentally, and also in connectedness with our meaning of life and the sense that life has for us. So I always think that a healthy person is not the person that will never get ill. You can see how healthy they are because when they get an accident or they get ill, how much healthy way they come over the illness. Yeah, how much they live the event of the illness, not as a tragedy to pull them into victimacy, and why this and why me and why now and all these things. It's like this event happened to me, and let's see how I use everything I can to be able to manage and to go to balance again, because life has taken me out of balance here because I fall from the bicycle, or because I get a diagnosis, or because something happened. So this is the way how I see also the health of a person. And I think independently sometimes I have a client was who is suffer from schizophrenia, and he managed with his illness so well. I used to work it with a colleague, psychotherapist and psychiatrist in my area, and he managed his condition so well that when you will enter to his life, he will tell you, look, I need to tell you something, not to get scared or anything. Just, I have to tell you that I'm with this diagnosis. Don't worry. I'm taking medication. I have the best team of therapists dealing with me. I'm just telling you, if you see me time to time talking by myself, I had these sticks time to time because there is a couple of things I'm still dealing with. So please don't worry about me. So I think this is a healthy condition, how we come like all the people that we are in recovery. We say, no, I don't drink. I'm in recovery for 20 years, 3 months and 2 weeks. So it's like we acknowledge what we're going through, but we learn how to live with it, or like people in recovery, how we learn how to live without the object of our addiction. But we can give you a hint about that, so you don't suffer for us. This is my reality. I deal with it. So you enjoy yourself. I'm enjoying myself, and I deal with that reality. Because also, one of my teacher was saying recently is like, he said, let's return to Freud. And Freud said that a healthy person is the person who know how to work and how to love. And my teacher said, and I'm going to add to that, how to create, because we cannot take creativity out of it. So I think in that matter, how we live our life, how we heal our victimhood, and areas that sometimes life created for us, or other created for us, or we created to ourselves, but how we balance, how we get into alignment with the breath work. The whole process is much more dynamic, and it will go in depth, isn't it, Jim?
Yes, you're bringing up a couple of very important points here, Viola. I will give credit to the first psychiatrist from whom I took in graduate school a psychopharmacology class. And he said that the judicious use of medications was simply to help a person bring their resources back into their control enough so that they would take over their life. So a medication was just something that was used as a way to help a person get back into resourcefulness for themselves, not something that they necessarily were going to be needing or taking their whole life. Labeling of a person, as I said, should be of a condition, not of the person. So even saying a schizophrenic versus a young man who is experiencing schizophrenia may sound like semantics, but it helps puts us back into no, this is not a schizophrenic. This is not a depressive. This is a person who is experiencing certain things that make their function in the world a challenge. Now, we can go even beyond saying, okay, I have this challenge and it makes me different, but I am doing what I can to fit in, to recognizing that in many early cultures, people who were different were seen as an important part of that culture because they had skills and tools that others in the culture didn't. Many people who now might be labeled as mentally ill were, when they were treated with respect and honored, were shaman. They would see things that other people didn't see, not because they were crazy, but because they were tapped into other elements of reality. And so sometimes if we get too much into our diagnoses and categorizations and trying to make everyone look the same or normal or non-threatening, what we miss is what are the gifts that these people have? Do these symptoms say something more than I have a dysfunction? Do the symptoms maybe reflect back, oh, maybe society has a dysfunction? Maybe the fact that none of us can truly accept and deal with our sadness would make me someone who is poignantly aware of my sadness a threat. So we can go further than just say, well, let's help these people look and appear normal by chemically rebalancing them or tolerating them. Let's look at what are they reflecting for us all. That is a whole another approach then that sees equality. And this is why breathwork is, as you say, has been such a revolution, is because it's very democratic. Every one of us has the ability to breathe. Every one of us has the ability to come back to our own source if we are seen that way and given the opportunity to let go of the judgments and the behaviors which will continue to keep us separated and dysfunctional.